get to the real question. So I'm a teenager seeking a summer internship. Where should I look? I keep running into postings where a college degree is required and or the dates don't work for me. You say summer internship. What are you looking for exactly? Is it like programming work? Is it um, web development? I guess that's kind of programming work anyway, but I have a feeling that it's not standardized for a lot of companies to hire, yeah, people who aren't at least in college. So it's hard for me to say what exactly you should do, but I think this is just some form of outreach. Like the people who are hosting these job requisitions, I think if you reached out to them and you said something like, hey, I haven't even started college yet, but I want to get experience. Here's what I've done so far. I think you need to make a pretty compelling case, to be honest, because they're probably like, oh, this is very non-standard and we don't like non-standard. So yeah, I think it's that. I think it's definitely have like a portfolio. I wouldn't necessarily make a resume because really all it's going to say is like I'm still in school and I haven't had a job like this before and I don't have a degree like that. So yeah, I would say to just try reaching out to the recruiters and see if you can do anything. All right, take care, TS, and thanks for dropping by. They don't even have any RGB. And yeah, there probably are good gaming chairs. This one is expensive enough where I would have thought, I don't know, that it'd be better. Maybe I haven't configured it correctly. The other thing is there's this like back pillow that I've always thought, should I even have this? Maybe I should just try without it for the stream. Let's try that. Yeah, get rid of all the pillows. They make you better at games. Yeah, that's it. Hey, tired sysadmin. Looking for programming more toward backend and infrastructure. Yeah, I would definitely say reach out to them then. Because as I mentioned, I think the problem you're fighting is the non-standardness of this. Contributing to open source is also a great way to network for that person. I think it's a good way to build your portfolio, but depending on where you are, the internships may not look or care at your open source work, and they might. And so I think it can help, and I think it's a good way to build that portfolio. I think I can't really comment on the networking of open source. I think it's kind of like anything else. You will get in touch with the community, you'll meet people. But I don't think the goal should be kind of finding a job. Do you ever use message queues like RabbitMQ? I don't think I've used RabbitMQ. I'm trying to think if I have used something. I've used, let's see, Amazon has SQS. I've used that. But is there a question behind this? I don't, because this is just kind of a yes or no. And feel free to use AddQ to add it. Hey Richie. Is it just hackathons? Yeah, I think that could probably be pretty good too. If there's ever any company behind the hackathon and not just a single person, let's say, then it might lead to something. Hi, Pankaj. Okay, next. How do you keep so positive in these times? I'm bored, can't do anything, and feel like I don't want to do anything. Any tips from either you, Adam, or chat? Hope this is not too negative. This isn't too negative. I think this is a very, very important subject to talk about for now. So it is March 13th, and that means that probably most people have been in some kind of isolation for a year. We're near the 1 year anniversary. I don't know if we're past it or earlier than it. I think what's tough is that you are still working. You specifically, Andorn, at least. Most people probably are as well. But you're still working, but you don't have that separation of environments anymore. So I'd say number one is separate environments as much as possible. So work from home, well, work environment from home environment is what I mean. And that way you've got like when you're not at work, you can be in home mode and relax. The other thing is I think social interaction is much harder to do in person now. I don't know what things are like where you live, but here I think they just started opening restaurants back up maybe a month ago. I still find that a little weird. I don't think I'd feel comfortable going into a restaurant yet. Vaccines are rolling out though. So this will take a different form, but it's like try to even do kind of the bare minimum, have like a game night with friends. I don't know, the popular games right now like Among Us or all the usual all the usual suspects. I don't know why I started listing them. But Anything you can find that will connect you again with other people, I think that'll help. And then the other thing to consider is that has this lasted for longer than isolation? This feeling of how do I stay positive? Because it's been longer than isolation, then that means that if we transition out of isolation, it might not necessarily fix things. But yeah, chat, you should definitely chime in with your own tips. What's helped for you? Because everyone's different and everyone's going to have different tips too. Hey, Jerwin, and thank you. I'm doing well. Okay, so let's get to the next one here. All closed, some jobs are open. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's, I don't know. I think this is just tough times for a lot of people. And the other thing is that everyone who has advice, it can't have been shown to work for like 10 years at a time because we haven't had isolation for 10 years at a time. So it's like, hey, what might have worked to get you through the first few months might be different from what you need for the next few months. How do I figure out if I'm going to actually enjoy working at a place? I find that the environment I'm in, most of the people around me, are the most influential factor to my enjoyment of anything I do. What's the best way to figure out what being at the job will feel like? This is a good question because this is like anything else. You have gauges, you have green flags, you have red flags, but then how do you know that this was all just an illusion and you get there to work and it's all terrible? So here's what I think you could do. I think you could ask to talk to team members or kind of eventual team members, depending on where you are in the process. Ask to talk to team members and then ask questions that are important for figuring out your work environment. So I have a whole bunch of questions that I had asked. Let me see if I can find these. Yeah, here. So these were, I have these listed as questions to ask a company. And these are the things that I care about before joining. So is the job remote? These are the kinds of basic ones. But then these I like quite a lot. So how do you feel about your lead and their impact on your work? This, if they're like, my lead really has no idea what I'm doing, and then we get to a deadline and they're pushing on me or something like that, it's like that tells you quite a lot, right? What's your least favorite thing about working here? What's your favorite thing about working here? These are the kinds of things I use to try to narrow down how does everybody feel about this. But in order to ask any of these questions, the first things first, you need to find those people to ask them questions. And once you've done that, I think you can get a pretty good idea of what it's going to be like to work there. And the questions you ask are your own questions. So you could say something like, what frustrates you on a weekly basis, and they might say something like, oh, the process or some other team or the work itself, who knows what. And if you're like, oh, the work itself, okay, no, that's fine, I'm used to that kind of stress, then yeah, you can kind of filter that as needed. Just big bangs. One week nobody had one, now everyone in my close and semi-extended circle is vaccinated. Yeah, nice. Yeah, they're rolling out more here. I live in Washington State, and I think Washington State just hit 2 million vaccinated people. I don't actually know what the state population is, so I don't know what percentage that is. Let me see. Washington State population. Oh wow, it's actually lower than I thought. 7.61 million. Yeah, so that's pretty good actually. Well, for where we are in the year at least. Hey, Carly Don. I feel like I've pronounced your name wrong before. Take a look into stuff by Cal Newport. Topics are broadly about how to be better at your work, how to get better at your craft. This is stuff about high quality leisure time. Yeah, this is really important. This is one of the things I learned when it came to burnout. I would sometimes take these knee jerk burnout vacations where it was like, oh, I'm just going to take the day off. But then I would still focus on work. Not that I was doing work, but just mentally, my head was spinning with work topics. And so that day off didn't feel like a day off. It felt like it was very guilty and I shouldn't have been doing it. And it's sort of like when you're a little bit sick, but not very sick. So you take the day off, but you're like, I could have sat at a computer today. So yeah, high quality leisure time, super important. And what that means for people is very different. I think if you're not already into meditation, just trying it out at some point is a good idea, not necessarily even committing to it, just seeing what impact it has on you. Find a hobby, read a book, take long walks, and so on. Yeah, yeah, and that well-roundedness of don't forget your own physical health, that is very important. It's easy to let that languish right now. Got to the US from New Zealand 2 weeks before COVID hit. Oh, congrats on getting married, by the way, Bonfire. Now I bought a house, I'm living here since you can't get back to family without a vaccine. It is a crazy time. I heard some stories about people who traveled and then got stuck where they were traveling to and they never planned on it. And so they were in a different country for 2, 3 months. That's got to be just so strange. I actually have a kind of a distant acquaintance. They moved to, I think, Ireland from the US. And so obviously huge travel time, whatever that is, 12 hours or something, I don't know what. And it was a couple, but only one of them actually made it to Ireland even after all this time. So they've been separated, not like legally separated or anything. They've been apart for a year at this point. It's like that is such a change to your life that you would never ever plan for. It's like, what are the odds of that happen? They are curious. Hey, Revox, I am doing well. Books are incredible. Yeah, I really hope it helps too, Enduring. I hope, I don't know. I hope that things return to whatever a good normal looks like for everybody. I don't think things will return to the normal we had before, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a bad new way of living. Thanks, Rock Paper Pie. Ended up including some of your observations in the Godot docs. Oh, nice. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, I haven't used Godot much since then. I did like it though. And so I want to get back to game development at some point. It'll probably be next year at this point. It's a long way off. But yeah, glad to hear it. Hey, Lightbeard. Let me add this to my list of things. Never stopped going to restaurants. Didn't have any issues. Super low COVID numbers. Not too worried about it personally. Could be that we're out in the country. Could be. It could do with a lot of things. And yeah, I was just talking to some friends who went to Mexico, and they said that there it's very different. A lot of people almost acting like there's no virus. And I read a whole bunch of. I don't think I could link this to you guys because I can't find it that quickly. But there was a whole FAQ conducted by scientists that talked about what's the impact of UV light on COVID and just distancing and the difference between ballistic particles from sneezing versus just breathing. So yeah, any number of things. Can't focus on work anymore because I waste too much time. Yeah, this could be that separation of environments again. Hey, Aim. And that's why I think having something separate between your work and your personal life is really good. And for most people, that used to be you'd go to an office. And of course, you wouldn't go to the office to go play video games or something after work. You'd go home for that. And you wouldn't go home to use your work computer. You'd go to the office for it. You think learning algorithms is more important than solving real problems? I think it depends on what your job is. So real problems is almost a loaded question. It's like learning algorithms, coming up with algorithms, to some extent, that could be your job. Maybe you're in research and you have to come up with some methodology for doing something that has never really been done before, in which case your job is just kind of learning and doing the algorithms. I feel like maybe this is more steered toward the interviewing process. Is it? Because, excuse me, I think a lot of the big companies put a lot of emphasis on algorithms and data structures. And the question might be, well, do you actually use that on the job? Is that really important? I have many mixed thoughts about this. But if that's where you're coming from here, I could talk a little bit more to that. So yeah, feel free to do add Q again if you if you want to. Let me see. Can we ask questions about anything? Yeah, I mean anything like computer science related. And welcome to the stream, Godric. So just use the add Q command. And like I said, kind of CS related. It could be something about your code. It could be about a framework. It could be about, I don't know, dealing with stress. It could just be anything random too. I mean, I could always just not answer the question. Aren't algorithms used to solve real problems at the end of the day? Yeah, but that's why I was saying I don't know what the intent of the question is. Everyone uses algorithms when they code. They could be very, very basic algorithms, but like you're using algorithms. And so the question might be something like, am I going to need to sort a linked list at my job? Like, no, you're going to use a library for that. Or write the code to sort a linked list. I guess you might be sorting linked lists. Hey, Remy. Hey, Trillian. Hey, Kevin. So I updated it on chat because of the add queue system. We started doing this. It's been working out pretty well. Okay, so let's see next one. Feel I'm constantly going from I'm bored and want to work or contribute to something to too much on my plate reaching burnout. Any tips to stay longer in the sweet spot in the middle? I read something online. This is sort of like, I always kind of think of these things like a pendulum. You know, there's a swinging pendulum, and if you notice it swung too far in one direction, you don't want to overcorrect and have it swing too far in the other direction. You want to get it kind of close to normal so that it doesn't swing as far back. The way I look at this is something like this. Do I have energy? And if the answer is yes, it's not go all out. Maybe that's what's happening for you. It's like, yeah, definitely don't do that. Um, Maybe this is what's happening to you. And this is the kind of thing a lot of people probably feel this motivation boost at around 10 p.m., 11 p.m., whenever right before you go to sleep, where you're like, oh man, I have all this energy to do something, but I'm about to go to sleep. And I think part of the reason why is you know you can't really act on it at that time. And so then you wake up in the morning and you don't have the motivation any longer. When you have the energy, you should use some of it and not overdo things. And so what I'm kind of saying is learn your limits. For me, I've talked about this a bunch of times in the past. For streaming, my maximum when I was doing this full time was 32 hours a week. I could not go beyond that. I hit this boundary a bunch of times and kept thinking, oh, I'll just push through it. That never worked for me. I had to at some point learn this is unhealthy. I should stop. So hopefully that helps a little bit here. Reaching burnout can come from many different things. I guess the other tip I give you is stress management. It could be that you're letting things affect you more than they should. And my wording might sound a little bit accusatory there. I don't mean it that way. I mean, maybe there are certain problems that if you were to kind of put into perspective, they wouldn't be as bad, and that then you could work for longer. You think it's possible to replace the all? Oh, this sounds like an actual. You should add this as a question you add to. What I'm doing is I'm trying to read chat and catch up on whatever the current. Oh, you did add it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to catch up on chat, and then once I've done that, move on to the next question. And it looks like we're getting a decent chunk of questions in here. Like taking up responsibilities at work because of not having much for weeks, then everything comes together at once. Hmm. That that sounds like kind of a load balancing problem. There's no timeout between being able to add them. If people are abusing it, I'd probably just time them out. Yeah, it sounds like a load balancing problem. If you have, let's say in any 3 month period of time, you have something like 1 month of next to nothing, and then 1 month of sprint, gotta go fast, and then 1 month of moderate work. This you should probably talk about with whoever's figuring out the work tasks. And if it's you who's figuring it out, then that means I think you should probably figure this out in such a way that you can smooth out this graph of my work is all over the place. Oh, they had to add questions twice for it to register. I wonder if the bot is not responding. Oh, or maybe there is a timeout for it. Ooh. Okay, hang on. Maybe there's a. I don't know how you even do this in Phantom Bot anymore. Let me look this up really fast. It used to be a cool calm command for the cooldown command. Actually, Rami, if you have some time, do you mind looking into this really fast? Is this it? Yeah, there it is. Cool calm command seconds. Using -1 removes a cooldown. Okay, let's try that. Okay, yeah, hopefully that works. If you guys see that happening again, please let me know. And thank you for seeing that, pointing that out to me. Okay, next question from Human Puppet. I love solving problems and spending hours fixing and refactoring code or writing algorithms, but not really writing new code. Do you have any advice on maybe where I should go with my career? I'm a junior software developer at the moment. This is pretty interesting because this is very different from how I think a lot of people treat their jobs. I think the consultant route might be the best route for something like this. Because I'm trying to think, most jobs probably don't have someone who's dedicated to revamping their old systems. So what I would say is either consultant route or some kind of like big company that has lots of legacy code bases. There's probably tons of refactoring to do there. The thing is, it's probably not a specific job title. Because to be honest, I don't think most companies kind of value fixing that tech debt. The ones who do, it's probably that they hire consultants in to work on that. Yeah, government, defense. I guess you can kind of think of this as really almost any long lived code base is going to have a lot of refactoring that needs to happen. The problem is, again, like, is there a job just for, hey, come in here, just just kind of act as a filter feeder for our code base? Yeah. Also, hard curious if you don't mind trying to not segment your messages. So, any tips separating work and home at home? This is something you should look up online in addition to what I say here, because I've got some ideas, but I think in general it's have different physical locations, um, have different kind of professional and home attire. So, like, still get dressed for work as though you were going in. And it's basically have as many different things as you can, right? Have different boundaries. So, like, don't watch YouTube on work time. Maybe put your phone in another room. This is something I'd actually started doing. I think this was pretty helpful. What else? You can even do things like play different music from what you normally play. I think anything that signals to your brain that this is different from my home time is what you should try to do. And then there are other things you can do that are kind of like harder boundaries. You could set up like a firewall for social media sites so that you just can't use them while you're at work. Hey, Disc 105. Did the stream die? I should still be online. Okay, stream didn't die. Cool. Yeah, thanks. I've heard the different music idea. That sounds really effective. I'm not sure. I'm just throwing things out there. I haven't actually tried that. Yeah. But hey, everyone who's just joining in, hey Lone, hey Curious Drive, hey Earl George. All right, Google doesn't require a degree anymore. Do you think this is a trend that will continue, and is it worth going to computer science for a degree? Whether or not companies generally expect it, I've said kind of the same things about degrees at any point, which is, do you need the structure of a degree, of having other students there, of having professors, of having a curriculum planned for you? So if yes, get a degree. That's what I think is the biggest reason. Now, the second maybe kind of biggest reason would be, do you want to work at a company that heavily biases toward having a degree? In the US, in the companies I've worked for, this has not been a problem ever. I've worked with people who have not had degrees. I've worked with people who have had unrelated degrees. So I haven't seen this too much. But if this is wherever you want to work or wherever you live, then that's something worth considering. All of that will probably be changing a bit. The third factor, I think, is the social factor. Not during COVID, but in general, going to college means meeting a bunch of people, working with them, kind of broadening your horizons, sort of thing. But I think this is the biggest reason to go. If you feel like you can't get that information yourself or wouldn't get that information yourself, then by all means, yes, you should get a degree. And so my thoughts haven't really changed as companies have kind of come in or out. At some point, if companies stop having this pressure of, well, you need a degree or you need this long in the workforce, I'd just delete this as a concern. But the number one thing is still this. And this probably goes without saying, but you should also probably consider the cost. This kind of only goes for people in the US, I feel, where university cost is through the roof. So that's another thing to balance out there. Hey, fun. Yeah. I notice it's not just about being focused during work, but also not being distracted by work when you're done, having a separate room. Yeah, yeah. I think that's good too. I tend to close my laptop and then I have, at least on Android, you can have a work profile on your phone. And on the work profile, if I were to tap that button, I would see my work email, my work chat, whatever else. I do not have that on basically ever, even when I'm at work because I'm sitting in front of my computer. But yeah, disconnecting as much as possible, because otherwise what happens is you're just constantly in work mode. And when you're constantly in work mode, you burn yourself out. It doesn't matter that it's 8 p.m. and it's just like, oh, let me just check a couple emails or something. It's like, no, you have not had the momentum to relax. Also, I don't know if I said hi to you, Fled, but hi, Fled. All right, next question 11 out of 14 here. Sorry, it's taking me a little bit of time. Hi, Adam. Do you think it's possible to replace all the mind-numbing activity with some quality leisure, like Twitch versus books? Are you saying this is mind-numbing? Huh? Maybe junk entertainment is just a habit that you need to push through to break, kind of like what you did with Hearthstone. Here's what you got to be careful of is just moving the goalposts here. So for example, cutting out YouTube to pick up Instagram. It's like, that doesn't do anything. So this is very similar to dieting. It's a lifestyle change. It's not let me get to my goal weight and then revert to my old habits. It's let me tone down where my time is being spent on things that you might consider to be mind numbing. With that said, something I've been kind of questioning for myself here is it possible to get to a point where all you're doing is productive activities because you've changed your standard so much? And I think for some people it could be, and for other people it never will be. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're spending, so let's say your day goes like this. You wake up, you do some like pre-work stuff, you've got about 8 hours of work, and then you have, let's say, like 5 to 6 hours of just your own time. So of that 5 to 6 hours, my question is basically, how much of that time could be productive and not have you go insane at some point? And yeah, what's the answer to that? I don't know. It's somewhere between 0 and 5 to 6. So I don't think you should ever completely rule out that just totally mindless entertainment activities. I think at some point we all sort of need those. You had a really hard day at work. You're just exhausted, and you want to sit down on the couch and watch Netflix, and it's not an educational thing. It's just you're just watching TV. That is fine. I think where it becomes a problem is when you feel like you can't balance everything else you're doing, so that you're spending, let's say, all 6 hours on this, and then chores are piling up, social obligations are piling up, and you just feel like you can't manage. So cutting down on this, just kind of being mindful of where you're spending your time, and also figuring out, is this doing anything for me, is a great question to ask for any activity you have. So you mentioned Hearthstone. For me, Hearthstone started as something that was fun, and then it turned into something that felt like a chore. And I really need to ask myself, is this fun anymore? And when the answer was no, I deleted everything I had, like uninstalled. I've never played the game again since. And I think it's very easy to get into a groove of something that's not good and just never question it and just keep doing that thing. So some amount of introspection is really good for this. I think picking up Instagram is worse than YouTube. It might be. Yeah. Ooh, did I miss something? Go through a tutorial, learn how to build a particular project. Hang on. Oh, this was added as a question. Okay, yeah, and I will get to it then. Okay, consistent physical exercise also helps my mind not get to the point of insanity. Yeah. Never neglect your physical health. This, in my mind, comes down to eating, exercise, sleeping, and is that it? Uh, yeah, well, that's the biggest things at least. I can't think of anything else. All of these things are so important. I think especially sleep and exercise. I think you could probably, if you had to sacrifice anything, eating could probably be the thing. You could probably eat slightly worse than normal if you're still exercising and sleeping. Watching a TV show or reading a book is not actually resting from mental work. You need to do absolutely nothing for at least 10 minutes. This is where I think meditation is really good for people. It acts as that buffer. Meditation is almost by definition trying to like clear your brain. It's not entirely, it's really mindfulness for a lot of people and just being aware of what's going through your brain. But I think it's really good to consider adding this into your routine somehow. Oh no, it's me. You do your dailies every day. Yeah, and by the way, that's why dailies exist for games. It's to build that habit and get it so that if you miss a day, you feel like, oh, I'm behind. I gotta play every day. Gotta give Blizzard my money. All right, next question here. I have good JavaScript knowledge, mostly learned by myself. By the way, I just changed the bot so that if a message is long, it doesn't say who sent it. So let me see who this was. Yeah, it was Lernick. Okay. Yeah. Oh wait, it says right before I. Of course. Okay, so this is Lernick. All right, mostly learned by myself. I know the basics of JavaScript, and I know enough to do simple tasks, slider, carousel, dropdown. I have difficulties with Ajax and using JS frameworks. I started learning a bit of React, but I reckon I need to have better JS foundation. Do you have advice of a good way to learn JS without missing parts by myself? I have downloaded some ebooks. I'll probably buy an online course. I was wondering some other ways. I think that's roughly what it is. I think there's learning by doing, there's learning by watching, there's learning by reading. There's really any medium you can think of for this. And so something you can consider is balancing the foundations versus the frameworks. So something that I would do at this point for myself, if I didn't know JavaScript, I might start with, let's say, like, I don't know, 2 days of learning just JS itself, but then I just immediately transition into learning React. And part of the reason why is because I've learned enough at this point where I think I could start picking up what's going on in JavaScript by learning React. So if you know another language, that's a route you might want to consider. If JavaScript is your first language, or you feel like you haven't really learned another language completely, then it could be worth focusing more on JavaScript itself. If you're going to do that, what I would say is try to do some like JavaScript intensive tasks instead of something where it's like JavaScript related. And the important thing for this is just like the scientific method of analyzing which variable needs to be tweaked. So let's say you were to pursue, you wrote, I don't know, let's say you wanted to learn scripting and you're like, you know what, I'm going to make World of Warcraft. Does that involve scripting? Yes. There is Lua scripting in the game. Is that all that involved? By no means. So what you're doing with making sliders, carousels, and everything, these are web development related tasks. Just the JavaScript component of it would be something like, okay, which image do I load? How do I load that image? And so maybe what you might want to focus on is something where you're just thinking of, how do I write a class, a function, maybe an algorithm, maybe a small program that does something. Maybe it downloads a file and manipulates a file somehow. Maybe there's any number of projects you could do here, but those might be more focused on JavaScript itself, which would help teach you where you're falling short on this. The other thing you can do, and I know I mentioned all these different mediums here, but learning through open source is really kind of fits under learning by reading. There are lots of JavaScript projects out there, and you can see how they did things, and you can just go through their code and say, would I have done it this way? Do I understand what they're doing? And what can I incorporate from this into my own code? Thanks for the answers. I forgot the question you asked. Oh yeah, replace the mind-numbing activities. Yeah. Now, what did Randy link in? I highly recommend watching this video by CGP Gray. Thinking about attention. Yeah. I hope that helps. Hey T-Virus, seems like you coded it for like 5 years. Yeah, the game is not online anymore. Botland, I discontinued last year. I feel bad about this. Every once in a while, someone will pop into the Discord. This actually happened today, where someone's like, oh, hey, I found out about Botland. This looks great. How do I play it? And yeah, there's no way to play it anymore. And I feel bad about that. And I spent a lot of time, and a lot of other people put effort into it too. But yeah, those are the behind me nowadays. But anyway, things are going well outside of that. What I do for meditation is pay attention to the sensations produced by my breathing. Yeah, a lot of people, when they're starting on meditation, I think they try to focus on the here and now. What am I sensing through everything? What am I hearing? What am I smelling? What am I feeling? The sensation of the clothes on your body or your feet against the floor. And I think that really helps kind of snap you away from your just winding brain and the thoughts you might be having. Hey, Physitronic, and Hampty Tag. All right, good. Yeah. That's awesome. I wear my Botland shirt at least once a month. Oh man, I've been wearing shirts like this all the time, so I haven't been wearing my Botland shirt. Someday I should. Just made a homework routine taped to the bottom of my monitor. White light, techno, fill water bottle. Nice. Yeah, I think this will really help. I give it a shot and see where it takes you. So the last time I was here, you helped me break free of my analysis paralysis, and I finally picked up. Oh, nice! Did my strategy work for you? By the way, for anyone wondering what my strategy was, so analysis paralysis is when you've flung all of your decision making at a problem and you still haven't come to a conclusion. And so my way of overcoming analysis paralysis was commit to the decision that sounded best in the last 10 seconds. Don't think about it anymore, and by committing to it, now you won't be able to question, was that the best or was it not? And the reason why I think this is a good way to get through it is because you are paralyzed because of your analysis. So you need to stop analyzing to get past it. And it's a very uncomfortable process at first. But anyway, glad to hear that. So far it's been awesome. I'm currently finishing a Udemy course that's done an excellent job, but I'll still have a lot to learn. My concern is I won't try and build my own project separate from a tutorial, and I'll find a new tutorial as a result. Okay, I think there are two problems you're mentioning here. One is the project really mine if I'm doing a tutorial? And two is, what if I flip from project to project? I think that's what you're getting at here. And if not, definitely let me know. But number one, I want to comment on whether or not it was a problem of yours. This is something that when you're getting into any sort of kind of creative endeavor here, you will sometimes be told to emulate what another person did. And so I'll give you a concrete example here. Composition. Music composition, I've been trying to get into for a while. I've made some compositions, but when I read advice online, a lot of times people are like, look at what famous composers do and just try to figure out how you can incorporate that into your own work. And I always thought, like, okay, so I take a chord progression from Beethoven. Now is it really my piece in the end that I've composed? And it's like, none of that should matter, right? You're still learning, you're still having fun, and it is your piece in the end. It is your code in the end. You're going to put your own little flair on this tutorial or this project. And if you don't, you always could afterward. So that's number one. I think don't let this get in the way. But it sounds like this might have been more of a concern, which is what if I'm jumping from project to project? And I've mentioned this, I've harped on this a ton of times, but what are your goals? If your goals are learning, then are you learning? Are you meeting your goals through this? Is your goal to make your own standalone project from start to finish? Then maybe your goal isn't being met. But without knowing what your goals are, you can't know if there's actually an issue here. So it sounds like maybe things aren't bad. And so I need to hear some follow-ups. By the way, feel free to do another add queue or, God, I really need to copy paste who sent these questions. Yeah, Tights, isn't it? Yeah. It did literally just pick go because it was nice. Okay. All right, let me see if I got everything that's not an add queue yet. Yeah, I did. Okay. All right. Hey, Curious Drive. I'm doing well. I feel I'm a little conflicted about these streams because I like doing them. I like answering people's questions. I like providing value. And sometimes I feel like people just need the tiniest of nudges to be back on track. And that's it. And it's like, if I can be the person to provide that nudge, awesome. But what I don't like as much is that I feel like there are the people who don't enjoy these streams and I can't be as inclusive of what they want because I'm only streaming for like, what, 6 hours per month maybe? And in that time, I wanted some consistency. And anyway, this is on my radar. I know I mentioned this at the beginning of the stream. Hey, Chris. I don't have any solutions yet. So Trulian asks me with a question about real problems versus algos. I'm stressing that my algorithm data knowledge is low, and I'm now soon finished with my degree. I'm in an internship right now, and I'm already fairly productive, getting stuff done and through reviews. However, I feel like I'm just applying tools, and I feel like I don't know how they work. Should I be stressing about my lack of knowledge beyond the basics? I don't think you should stress too much. You're in an internship, you felt like you're productive. I would say solicit feedback from coworkers about your performance. Where can you do better? Where are you doing well? According to them. So yeah, according to them. That's one thing, just to kind of hopefully put your mind at ease a little bit. The other thing is that you've got to consider that technology is an absolutely sprawling topic, or set of topics even. So let's say you are, and the last thing I want to talk about before I forget is kind of normalcy. Let's say you are making a system, and actually let's just talk about it concretely. Let's talk about Botland. With Botland, I use AWS. With AWS, I got a load balancer, I got VPCs, I got VMs, I got whatever other number of things. Should I know exactly what's going on in the load balancer? Maybe. Maybe if I had to do a lot of maintenance on it. But in general, AWS is like, hey, I've like nicely bundled this up and packaged this over to you. Here's a load balancer. And you can just use it. And it sounds like that's what's going on here too. You're using these tools, you're applying them, and you're getting the job done. Now, should you know how all of these tools work? Again, the answer is maybe. If you have to maintain those tools, if you have to be able to build on them at any point. But if you're able to do your work, at some point you need to put the blinders on because of how sprawling technology is. So should you know exactly what's going on in like the V8 engine to run JavaScript? No, probably not. If you're adjacent to those topics, then yeah, probably. So I would say don't worry about this too much. Learn what you need to learn and learn where you need to spend more time. And then finally, the last thing is normalcy of this. So if you were to ask a lot of software engineers, hey, can you describe your job? Probably many of them would say, I just glue some code together. I'm not doing anything innovative. I am just taking this person's library and this person's library, writing a few if statements or function calls or something and packaging it up, and it's done. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing. And if you find that to be a bad thing, you might want to work at maybe a smaller company if that's possible. I know this is an internship, but something to consider here, because I think at bigger companies, a lot of it is like we need to make an incremental change to a massive code base that we already have. Yeah, no more bot land. Yeah. How's working at the new company? It's pretty good. So it has now been about 4.5 months. And for those who don't know, I'm working at Google. I like it. I finally feel like I'm hitting my stride. I think I'm working with good people on a pretty good project. And I can't talk too much more about that. I want to, in another month and a half, when I've been there for 6 months, I want to make a blog post summing up kind of all of my thoughts on this. So for now, I'll say it's going well. I like it. It is quite challenging. There's that too. All right, let's move on here. Okay, so Tomas says, in my current company, we have occasionally a user story, which just blows up because not all use cases were thought of before we started working on it. Then I feel frustrated that things keep changing over and over during the implementation. Is this normal? Is it mostly a product owner or whoever defines a user story responsibility to analyze and think of most use cases? Or is it team responsibility? So to answer the first question, is this normal? I would say yes, it's normal. I don't think it's good, but it's not unheard of that requirements change as you go through. And this can happen for any number of reasons. And part of what you can do about this is try to deliver the sort of minimum viable slice through their stories that they share. But now let's talk about whose responsibility is it to work on this. At the end of the day, you have job titles. So whoever is the product owner, it's like, let's say all of this totally failed. If you think about it from the who would get fired perspective, it'd probably be the product owner. With that said, does that mean that there's no responsibility on the team? No, there is responsibility on the team. So if you ever see something and you're like, hold on, like I need to understand this a little bit more. Can I see the customer data behind this, or can we have a summary of what happened here? And so this is something that gets a little bit tricky because this comes down to communication and knowledge sharing, but all of that takes time, and that time needs to be spent potentially by the product owner and then potentially by all of the team to consume that knowledge. And then you might start asking, well, wait a second, we have all this overhead. Now I've got to read all these customer stories and basically do the job of the product owner. And so things start to get a little bit fuzzy there. So what I would say is kind of the minimum you can do is push back on some things or ask for more data if you ever feel like something is questionable. And maybe try to identify the patterns of, hey, requirements tend to change on these user stories more than others so that you can shield yourself from this in the future. It's kind of vague for me to give answers to this, I know, because I don't know the full details. So hopefully some of that helps. If not, yeah, feel free to ask another question. Now that's pair program. Okay, let's see. The resume screening stage of an interview seems to lack nuance and prove to be one of the harder parts of landing a job. Are there strategies to circumvent this? And if cold or directly emailing people to get interviews is one of the strategies, how do I find who I should contact at a company and how can I contact them? Yeah, okay, so this is, I think, a very circular problem here. So you have automated job postings, and then you have people who are just kind of like spamming their resumes out. And what that leads to is the problem that you're facing. Now, there's less nuance. There's more, okay, let's automatically filter through job postings. Let's see if they've got the skills that we posted, and then they do a match, and then they look at people. And even then, if you're getting 200 resumes and you're one person, can you look through 200 resumes? Maybe, if that's part of your job description. But if you have a bunch of work on your plate and you're looking to hire someone, you're probably not going to look through all 200 resumes. And then even if you did, it's like, will you go look at their GitHub repos? Will you really try to see like, okay, who is this person? How would they help the company? You're probably going to take a few and then kind of pick the top person. Or if your company has resources, maybe there's someone who's dedicated to this job. So I agree, it does lack nuance. So now how do you overcome this? I think that to some extent, it's a numbers game. to some extent, it's can you improve your resume as much as possible? Like, have you already done this? Have you run it by other people? Have they looked over it and said, here's what stands out to me? And do you kind of understand how these systems work? So these automated systems sometimes pick up keywords. And so they might, if you never mentioned, let's say, JavaScript on your resume, maybe they rank you a little bit lower. And again, this is all for companies that don't have time to look through everybody. What VS Code theme is this? Yeah, the theme command for that. Yeah, Atom One Dark Vivid. Now, as far as directly reaching out to people, I think that can be fine. I think this is all how much time do you have. If you have the time to try it and see if it works. What I've found is if I get a response from a human at a company saying, hey, we don't think you're a good fit, I'll sometimes reply and be like, oh, why not? Like, I actually think this could be a really good fit. I have experience that's similar to what you're looking for. And sometimes I never get a response from that email, and sometimes I do. So yeah, definitely try it. And then beyond that, like I said, it's just a numbers game. You can't win them all. You can't even get responses from everybody. Ooh, nice, Harcurious. You two can make a new product now. Always amazed how fast you think. Were you always like that, or do you think you improved the management of your thoughts by streaming for so many years? I think some of the things that, by the way, thank you. I think some of the things that improved were typing while talking, and maybe this sort of mental mapping process that I do. Some of it is probably innate. Some of it is probably just, yes, this is how I think. And then some of it is, I have a prompt here. I tend to try to follow things by working backward if I need to. So if I was ever like, wait, what was that question about? I can always scroll up to my notes and now see what was going on. And then over the years, as I've done this, I try to find what is important. How do I improve this process? So I don't know how much of this I can transfer necessarily. A lot of you have now seen this process enough, and I've actually heard feedback from people saying this helped me organize my own thoughts, or I started typing up notes, and I think that's great. So I think the most basic thing I can suggest is for anybody, just take more notes. You'll probably find some value in that, and you'll improve this over time. And then the other thing as a corollary to that is, depending on how old you are and how long you have left in your career, you have to think about it as, let's say you plan on having a 15-year long career and you are on year number 2. A change you make in year number 2 is going to affect the vast majority of your career. So let's say that change is even something really basic, like improve words per minute by 5. Think of how many more words you'll type over your whole career just by doing that, or how much time you'll save if you type the same amount of words. It's like that can be a pretty big change. So something as simple as taking more notes. If you're in year 2 and you've got 20 years ahead of you or something, it might take you 5 years to solidify your own note-taking process. But that's great. You'll still have another 13 years that you can benefit from it. So I think this is where some amount of process and methodology and how we think and work is good to establish. You mentioned learning through open source. How do you do that? I understand that you want to find open source projects and try to contribute to it. I tried doing that, but I find it overwhelming. I don't necessarily mean to contribute to it, but I'll read the rest of your question first. Try doing that. I find it overwhelming because it's a really big project that requires lots of reading, and only then can I contribute to it. Do you have any advice how to approach open source projects? Also, how do you find them? How do you pick one where you can learn and contribute? Okay, so let me talk about first the context of where I was coming from. When I was saying you can learn by reading, learning by doing, and one of the things I talked about here was open source, what I meant is more to learn a language. So when you're learning a language, you don't need to understand what the code is doing as a whole necessarily. Like you could be looking at 100,000 lines of code and just zoom in on this function and see, okay, how did they organize their arguments? How do they return from this function? How do they structure their if statements? And so from that point of view, you don't need to do a whole lot of research. You pretty much can just go find JavaScript on GitHub, for example. But to answer your other questions you had, that this is overwhelming, these projects are very big, I think you can still seek out small projects. Think about any tool that you use that you like. So for example, I use ShareX. ShareX is not probably, I don't know if it's open source even, but it's maybe not even a small project. So let's think of some other things that I use. I've used Espanso for text expansion. I use Karnak for the on-screen keyboard shortcuts, which I think are just showing underneath my camera right now. These are smaller projects. These are basically just utilities. I have looked through the code of some of these things. In fact, I've looked through the code of both of these. And it's easier to penetrate because they're smaller projects. and because you can use it. If you take, like, let's say I use a color picker or something. Okay, so I just took a color, and now this is on my clipboard. So I use a shortcut, I pick a color on the screen, and I paste it over here. I can go find that function probably pretty quickly and understand what it's doing and why. And again, this all comes down to, are you a user of the product, and is that product somewhat small in a code base? So I wouldn't go look at things like GIMP, which is open source. It's like a Photoshop alternative for those who don't know. That's probably huge. In fact, if we were to just look that up, I'm nearly positive it's open source too, right? GIMP from source. Okay, they don't have a GitHub. I'm not going to go look through this. So how can you pick a good one? I would say look no farther than what is in your start menu or your applications on your computer, and go see which ones of those are open source. And if not, then look for alternatives to those things that you use. So for example, I'm using, I don't know, Notepad, let's say. Notepad is not open source. It's like hardly any code tool whatsoever. But there are free note-taking programs out there. It is open source. Okay, got it. Yeah. Well, I was trying to find a closed source example by just looking around my computer, and I looked at VS Code and I was like, that's open source. And I looked at Chrome and I'm like, that's Chromium's open source. I looked at Yada's open source. There's a lot of open source stuff I'm using. Any tips on getting others excited about automation testing and test-driven development? I think this is always a lead by example kind of problem, where I don't know about the word excited. You might never get them excited, but you need to kind of prove the value of it to them. And the way I would always kind of do this is a presentation or a video, and maybe some like real world example with the code that they use on a day-to-day basis. So it is much more impactful to say something like, I did this and I found and fixed like 14 bugs, versus, hey, here's a methodology I think we should try, and I don't know if it's going to work, and it's going to involve a lot of churn, and we might undo it a month from now. And that's where that lead by example comes in. Kind of take the initiative, try it out yourself, and then see if you can pitch it to other people. So yeah, I think that's a good strategy. Hey Chippy. GIMP is 1.5 million lines. Wow. Yeah, that's not the kind of project you want to get into if you're asking a question about feeling overwhelmed. All right, to follow up, question number 2 is more about how I can work on a project without getting in my own way by saying, I'm not sure I understand this. Oh, I see. Okay. Did this with Python last year because I just did tutorial after tutorial. So I was afraid I didn't truly understand the foundations. I don't want to have the same issues with Go. So for one, I think you'll find it a little bit easier to learn your second language than your first language. Going from Python to Go, even though there are similarities. Even though they're not the same language though, you'll still find that you've got a leg up. I think the other thing is kind of just being honest about where your gaps are. So let's say you saw some construct in Python. Let's say it was classes. And let's say you were like, I just don't understand what inheritance is or when I would use it. Take the time at that point to deviate from the tutorial and say, I want to go learn more about inheritance, and I want to do some inheritance focused thing. And then maybe you find a tutorial on inheritance actually, or maybe you just go read about it some more and you ask questions to people on Discord and you talk to other students or coworkers or something like that. I think that will help you figure out, is this a gap that is meaningful? Because let's say you didn't understand something about Python, like, I don't know, embedding it in other languages. This is not something everyone's going to have to do when they use Python. And so if you come across a tutorial where it's like, hey, we're going to use Python from a C++ program, it's like, maybe that's just not worth understanding for right now. This is what I was saying earlier when I said technology is such a sprawling subject. You really do need to focus on some subset of what you want to do. And it's very similar to being on Wikipedia and just, going and looking at, that's weird. Oh, okay, some DNS problem. Wikipedia has a million links on it. And so you're reading through it and you're like, oh, reflexes, there's a Wikipedia article on that. And you get so much farther away from where you started, like looking at a cat Wikipedia page, that now all of a sudden you're talking about like military strategies in the 1400s. You're like, what am I doing here? Like, it's interesting to learn, but it's not important for what you were trying to do originally. So yeah, I would say keep track of where this stack is of the problems you're coming across. So like I said, you start with Python, you get to kind of inheritance. And so now like pursue a tutorial on this, and then eventually pop off the stack back to the first tutorial. Hey Aurelia. It was exactly one of the topics that hung out. Yeah. And that's the thing is there are fun parts of learning, there are not fun parts of learning. I kind of think about learning piano as part of this. A lot of people are like, I have to learn how to play scales and arpeggios, and it's like, what's the point of that? And for a lot of people that's not fun, but those are sort of the foundations. And so inheritance at first might not be fun, but any amount of that topic you can cut down. So if you think about it as points, if there are 100 points in learning inheritance and you got rid of 2 of them because you learned the basics of it, that's 2 you don't need to cover the next time you come in. So it's all just chipping away at these. What are arpeggios? I will link you to the Wikipedia page while I move on to the next question. So I find it hard to become invested in almost anything. Do you know of any methods I can use to make myself want to get better or become more invested? I have a wide variety of interests and it's hard to commit to one thing heavily. So for one, I don't talk about this too frequently on the stream because I'm not an expert at this. So all I will say here on this topic of mental health is make sure this isn't a deeper problem. If you're struggling with depression, that is not the kind of thing I can help with. And that might be what's at the core of you not wanting to get invested in things. So I'm throwing that out there of like, let's assume that this is not the problem. And now let's move on to what I could actually help with here. So one is kind of committing to interest. It's acting on motivation. And it's, let's say SMART goals is another thing we want to talk about here. I saw a TED Talk a while ago which said pair action to impulse. And it said something like the first 10 seconds after being motivated are crucial. So you're sitting around, it's a Saturday, you're watching some guy on Twitch, and you're like, man, I really want to do a coding project. Like, go take the action to start that coding project. Like, open up a design document, or open up your code editor, or, I don't know, do something. Like, move from your phone to your computer. You can take whatever step you want at first, but there's some amount of power to that, because motivation is just a good feeling. That's really it. It's not an action. It's, hey, I want to do something. And sometimes you feel like, man, even just wanting to do something gave me some satisfaction. So you know what? It doesn't matter that I didn't do it. But now you've had this repeated feeling of, well, I haven't ever gotten to those interests. How do I commit to them? And so this is where I think these SMART goals come in. I think there's actually an article on this on Wikipedia. I didn't even just type SMART. I meant SMART goal. SMART criteria, yeah. So I will quickly cover this here. It boils down to these words: specific. So make sure that your goal is not like improve my life. That's not specific. Measurable. So with improve my life, even if that were specific, which is not, how do you measure that at the end of it? Assignable, specify who will do it. I actually have heard this as like actionable. Make sure that there are actions as part of this. Realistic, this is pretty straightforward. And then time related, this is pretty straightforward too. So let's talk about what is a SMART goal. It could be something like work on a game project that I have. And so now we kind of boil it down. Okay, what are the specifics? Well, I want to code the battle system, just that part, let's say. And this is not super, this is very contrived what I'm talking about here. I'm just trying to give an example of this. So measurable, how do I know that I've done this at the end? Like, so the battle system can handle 5 players at once or something like that. Again, making things up here, right? Assignable, I always consider this actionable. What are the actual actions that are part of this? And then here's the part that I think kills so many software projects is realistic. Can you do this? And a lot of people tackle things that are of scope that is just way beyond what they should be tackling at that point, or that they don't balance what else is going on in their lives. So they think, oh, I've got 3 hours of free time per day, so I'll spend 3 hours of my free time doing this. It's like, that is not realistic. You'll burn out so fast doing that. So I think this is a really good way of at least trying this stuff and just keeping an eye on what's working for you and what's not. I still, for I think a year now, I've wanted to write a blog post on motivation and discipline, and I just have not gotten to it yet, which is ironic in itself. Although I've written other blog posts, so it's not that ironic. But yeah, when I get to that, I want to talk about some of these things. Maybe I should make this here. Give me a sec. Okay. I like the robot emote. No questions in the queue. What? Huh? Okay, yeah. I got done with all the questions. This hasn't happened in a long time. I actually didn't expect that. It's always been this kind of constant stream. Um, yeah, I think what I've seen as common threads throughout all these conversations, I talk about goals quite a lot. I think there's also like don't be so hard on yourself. I think a lot of people have very high expectations of themselves. And just what I mean by this is like figure out your goals, figure out if you're well, I guess this kind of goes with don't be so hard on yourself. If you're meeting them or working toward them, why don't you have a subscription button? Yeah, sorry, I'll pull it off the queue. I don't feel like I should charge for a stream like this. I don't really need the money right now, and I'm not doing this full time. That's kind of what my answer's always been. I gain more stars on a repo. No clue. Can you talk about algorithms and data structures with respect to interview prep versus solving real problems? Yeah, sure. So I think this is maybe a follow up from what I was talking about earlier. What I think about the interview process, first of all, I have a whole blog post I wrote. Where is this blog post? Blog interview, that's what it is. Okay, so I have this whole blog post I wrote on the actual prep for the interview process. But what I want to talk about here is what I kind of think has happened. So if you ever heard sort of big N companies, FANG companies, they typically have an interview process that is sort of, I'll say, leak code heavy, and then system design, and then almost like anything else, there's some behavioral questions. So a lot of people get kind of caught up on this stuff, and leak code heavy is where these algorithms and data structures come in. So my thoughts on this, there needs to be some gauge for measuring a software engineer. That gauge needs to be standardized, and that gauge needs to be something that is ideally indicative of the work that they'll do on the job. What we have ended up with at these companies is this process that tends to focus quite a lot on algorithms and data structures. You use algorithms and data structures when you're coding anything. If you use an array, it's not a fancy data structure, but it's a data structure, right? If you're using a dictionary, again, these are built into most modern languages nowadays. Well, arrays are in every language pretty much, but yeah, dictionaries are there now, native usually. You don't need to add in a library or framework. Even these are data structures, and the algorithms you're going to use with these are still algorithms, even if not crazy. So to some extent, there is a clear link between what you'll learn for this, even if they're just the basics, and what you're doing on an everyday basis. But then people start questioning, okay, well, hold on a second. What about all these problems where I have to like swap nodes in a binary tree, and I've never run across anything like that in my own code? And yeah, that might be true. And part of it is there's the theoretical aspect of, can you apply your knowledge to a problem you've never seen before without having to reinvent the wheel? Or do you have the knowledge of how to do that? So I think the process is a little bit flawed because in the real world, you have a computer in front of you. And that means you have a search engine, you have Wikipedia, you have whatever other number of things, Stack Overflow, for example. When you have all of these things, you don't necessarily need to know how does a binary tree work because you can look it up. And this gets to what I think is the most important thing when it comes to technology, which is the ability to learn new things. You will never know all of technology. You'll rarely know all of even the realm that you're working in. So if you're in the web development space, it's a funny thing. Can you name every library? This is facetious. I don't think you need to be able to name every library, but um, what I'm trying to get at here is since you can't know everything, and since new things come around frequently, and since you can't exclusively work with old things for the next 20 years, let's say, that you need to be able to learn things. So algorithms and data structures are no different from that. If you're not applying for FANG, there most likely won't be leak code questions or anything else. Yeah. At least where I've interviewed on the other side of the table, I feel like they're overemphasized often. Yeah, I would say so too. And that's why I specifically list these companies. In my experience interviewing for other companies, I think there have been leak code style questions, but they're like greatly toned down. And so you'll get something like, oh, here's a problem we ran into. How would you have solved it from a coding perspective? And it's like, okay, that was a realistic problem. Like this isn't just some theoretical thing. And you work through it and it's got some connections to leak code, let's say, but yeah, not too crazy. I remember the full NPM registry. Every day I wake up and I study the 10,000 new packages that we added. Yeah, this is where that meme came from. That sort of thing. Yeah. Oh yeah. Practical question. Whoops. Get Q. Okay. Let's see. When a GitHub project has hundreds of forks, how do you find those that are most followed, most successful? Couldn't find a way to navigate through. There's probably some external tool for this. What I tend to do is I'll click like 10 of them and then just look at the most recent commit. That's about it. But like I said, there's probably some tool for this. I'm not a GitHub expert or anything. And then the other thing I try to consider, the other thing you could do is like a Google search for the repo itself, and then just see where are people talking about it, or look at the issues tab of the source repo. So the one that is getting forked, look at the issues, and usually someone will say, "Hey, I made this one over here. Go to that one." Something along those lines. But there's no, as far as I know, there's no like official GitHub way of doing that, nor would they probably want to add that because then that would mean that there might be a favored repo. All right, what do you think of Deno instead of Node.js? I haven't looked into Deno too much. Here's what I think in general about this stuff, though. I think whenever any cool new technology comes around, it goes through the same life cycle of if there's an introduction, there's some like hype around it, then there's a maturation process, and then there's sort of the, I'll say, rotting or what's the word, like keeping up, I guess. And so somewhere in this process, right around here, after it has matured enough is usually when you'll start getting forks of those technologies. So what I look at for this is I look at like Java going to Kotlin to C Sharp. Java influenced probably tons of programming languages, but for sure it very heavily impacted these languages and whatever else runs on the JVM. And then I look at things like, okay, Python. Python is another one of those languages that just its ease of reading and writing encouraged so many things. So I think like Zig is pretty similar. Godot script was really similar. There's probably like millions of these, right? So when I think of Node.js in this, Node.js is one of those things where what has it influenced? So Deno is a very, very clear, obvious follow up to this. I don't know enough about Deno to talk about it, but I know that at least it was intended to fix some of what Node.js hadn't done. So I think they said there was going to be sandboxing of some APIs to begin with. There's going to be like more explicit module paths or something like that. And who knows what other improvements. When I say who knows, I mean, I don't know that. And so this at a high level is enticing. It's, hey, Node.js matured quite a lot. There's a nice ecosystem. There's a good community around it. I like it as software. So if Deno is the next step, then that means that there should ideally be improvements to it. So I'd keep an eye on it, but I don't know enough to talk about the specifics. Just to finish an interview process for a front end position, and the big questions I got were explain the Redux cycle and explain life cycle of React. Yeah, I think this will be pretty common for front end stuff, and I think this is very relevant as well. If they're going to be using that, they probably want to know like, are you aware of why you're doing this or for why? Hey, thanks for all the help, knowledge you're sharing. I'm a new grad and I just started applying jobs and have included the demo and repo links for my full stack web app projects. Should I be worried if the code quality is 100%? By the way, do try to use AddQ for any questions. I'll answer this one without the AddQ, but yeah, do try to use it for the future. So should I be worried if the code quality isn't 100%? There's room for improvement, especially on the backend code. When you're using it for an application, here's what I would say. I would say there's sort of like a cover letter or something, or there's a README in your repo. I would probably say something like, note to anyone reading, I could improve in these ways, list the ways, and then maybe say why you didn't do it. Because yeah, when we're writing code for ourselves, a lot of the time we're not going to maybe leave as many comments. We're probably not going to write as many tests. We're probably not going to write as many documents. And one way to take that as someone who's potentially hiring you is this person is not aware of those things. So even just calling out that, look, I'm aware of these things. I was doing this. I had 1 week of time, and I need to cut everything else. They'd be like, okay, yeah, that's reasonable. So I'd say as long as you explain it, I think that's fine. The other thing about code quality not being 100%, you're a new grad. You've just learned a ton, and you're going to learn a ton. So it's not like you're expected to be at rock solid. All the code's going to be perfect. I code no bugs. Like nobody's at the I code no bugs point. But yeah, so cut yourself some slack and also maybe include an advisory somewhere. Okay. Check out this. Hey, free technique. Emily was by the jQuery language. Okay, hey Goose. Okay, next question. What do you think of programs like Obsidian or Roam Research? How is it beneficial to knowledge gain or note taking? I've heard of Obsidian. I have not heard of Roam Research. So, and I don't know much about Obsidian to begin with. So I actually probably can't talk about those programs. But when it comes to note taking in general, uh, here's my opinion on that. That's my opinion. Do it. I think it's really worth it for everyone to invest some time in getting good at taking notes and then kind of consulting with them. If you want to ever see what my notes are like, I make a lot of them public. Everything in this notebook, this Adam Learns notebook, is available to you guys. So every tab on the top of this, every section on the right side, all of these are public. You can go look through them. And some of the newer ones, I've been talking about my Kubernetes notes. I tried organizing these pretty well. I tried formatting them pretty well. Of course, these are available, so it's not like I'm going to point specific things out. And one of the things that I found works for me is just putting in links to everything. So if I ever am like, wait, API server, I don't remember this note, I just click this, there, now I'm there, and I can go see what did I mean by this. That's my very high level response to this, because like I said, I haven't used this specific program, so I can't really talk about those. Talked about this before, but I want to ask again if it's improved because I still hate switching. How do you maintain your speed after using a Mac, different key combos and everything for the vast majority of the days? I'm guessing you are using different keyboards than the Microsoft ergonomics. No, I'm actually using this keyboard for my Mac as well. And so what I did, the keyboard I'm using for those who haven't seen it is this one. What I did is I remapped keys to make sense for both computers. So let me think about this. My physical alt key is Command on Mac, and my physical Windows key is Alt on Mac. And the reason why is because by flipping those, it got a little bit closer to what I'm used to on Windows for hand shapes that I make. And then I remapped tons of keys on Mac. In fact, okay, so something on Windows, I'll give you an example is, if I press Windows key 5, I get to my terminal. So Windows key 5 gets me to Conemo, right? So what I did is I made Alt 5 on my Mac go to my iTerm2 thing. And that way there's just slightly less to remember. This does not make any sense on Mac. It makes sense on Windows because the fifth icon is Conemu, so pressing Win 5 goes to it. But for the sake of consistency, I tried to do as much as I could to bridge that gap. So yeah, same keyboard. Making Mac OS key bindings make sense to a non-Mac user is the worst. Especially controllers as command. Yeah, there are other things. I mean, you'll see me do this every once in a while where I press Alt and hit left here or something because I'm trying to move to... It doesn't matter to actually explain it. Yeah, sometimes I still hit the wrong keys. Interface is not in dark. Where's the option of dark? I think the web interface doesn't have it, or that it's somewhere else. I don't know, actually. Yeah, sorry, I don't know how to do that. Oh, unless it's dark for me is what you're saying on the web. Let me see. No, yeah, all I could think is that maybe in view there's... No. Yeah, I don't know if it's possible. There probably isn't a dark mode on the web version. Hey, Artie. Okay, so I did answer this one already. And the next one is this. What do you think of software consultant positions? I'll be a new CS grad, and the only positive feedback I've gotten for job applications were those kinds of positions. I think that it's not the right fit for me. And I don't think that should impact you too much, but I can still talk about the reasons because maybe this will help in your input. And by the way, my conclusion in the end is if that's all you're getting, try it out. Because you should probably figure out if it's a good fit for you. The reason why I don't think it's a good fit for me is I like job security, kind of not having to market to find another gig. What else? I want to, oh yeah, the big one was like learn from other people. I think as a consultant, you sometimes are the authority on a project. And I think it's like a scary level of responsibility for me too. So there are probably more of these that I haven't listed here, but these are some of the ones that I want to be able to learn from other people. These are some of the ones that are important for me, at least. With that said, my conclusion is it's still worth trying out. You're not committing to anything with your first job as a new CS grad. You should try what you have available to you. And if you're not sold on it after however long, just apply to a new place. But I think it's nice to have some stability after graduating and still be doing things that are relevant. Excuse me. There are a lot of pros to the job. I think you will learn a ton. It just won't be guided by other people necessarily. You'll get a lot of variety. You set your own schedule, especially when it comes to something like a vacation. If you want to take just a month off, great, take a month off. And yeah, there's probably some other pros here too. I'm not writing exhaustive lists for these things because I think in the end I'd say like, yeah, try it, see what happens. VS Code keybind saying they unified everything. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't use VS Code too much at work right now, but the editor that I do use, I try to customize to be very similar to VS Code. Hey, Beldathis, I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well too. I think a big thing is also that you won't be on a single project for a long time, similar to web agencies. Yeah, and for some people that's a pro, for some people that's a con. Sometimes the term for a body shop hires workers for companies. Sometimes, yeah, yeah, it could be either. And sometimes it could be lower level consulting work. Like I guess I kind of think of web development as you don't need to have been in the industry for 10 years to start doing web dev consultancy jobs. Make sure you don't underestimate the time spent on chore work. Yeah, yeah, good point. And chat, feel free to add all these sorts of things too. The other thing you might want to consider is, and this is kind of a neutral in my mind, but it's benefits versus pay. Your pay is almost always higher because you pay for your benefits yourself. And that includes things like vacation time. And so it's kind of neutral. Some people prefer that. Some people don't prefer that. If you're young, your healthcare is probably not going to cost too much. If you're not in the US, your healthcare might not cost anything. Kodoku. Is this a different person from who I'm used to? Anyway, work is going well. I had this note here. I should probably update this at some point. But yeah, work is going well. That's the short story. Okay, let me get to the question queue. Okay, Relicine asks, at what point do you think it's appropriate for someone to start applying for software engineering positions? In your opinion, what are the prereqs? So at what point is it appropriate? I think it's when you feel you meet the job posting about like 50 to 70%. And that's it. That's literally it. I don't think there's anything else. It's not when you have a degree, when you have a certification. If those are part of the job posting, then by all means that fits into this. But if it's just your arbitrary senior position, sorry, I read software engineering. I took that as the opposite. Okay, hang on. Let me amend this a little bit. I still think it's when you feel you meet the job posting about 50 to 70%. But I also think it's when you are ready for like a slightly higher level of responsibility. I think you'll be expected to influence more sometimes than just the code, depending on the company. And ideally, that's in the job posting itself. But yeah, it's basically just this. And so let's say your question is more, is it too early? I would say just apply and find out. Because this is a pretty lightweight process. Fixing up your resume, is, it depends on where you are with your resume. It could take an hour, it could take 2-3 hours, it could take maybe even longer than that. But in general, I kind of think of this as like, it's like a 2-3 hour task. So that part, yes, okay, fine, that's not tiny. But then applying afterward, it can be done sort of in your leisure time after work. And then that's it. You don't even necessarily need to follow through on these. If you hear back from them and they're like, yeah, we'd like to ask you for an interview, you could just say something like, um, sorry, I'm not ready yet, maybe in another couple months, or maybe you take the interview. And so this is a pretty good way of just kind of testing things out. Recently applied with only 2 years on the job experience. Basically got senior level compensation, but not the title, which is fine. Yeah, yeah, that's good. Sing, please do use the add queue command. So I want to make sure I'm getting to everyone in order. And actually, you would be the next question right after this one. How do you name classes, methods, variables, and group and structure them in a project? I'm really struggling in a Unity project because with certain scripts, I then ask myself which game object are now stuck in. What would you advise how to go about it? Okay, so when it comes to naming things, one thing that I aim for is consistency with the rest of the code base. So this has to do with style. Is it this style versus this style versus this style? I know their names for these things, camel caps and snake case and whatever this one is. So that's one tiny thing. The other thing is verbosity. So is it something like the variable which does the thing that acts as foo? I don't know. I'm just making things up, right? Or is it something that's just, like num people? Yeah, Pascal case. So that's naming, and then you think of like, how do I sum up the responsibility of this thing? So generally avoid things like util as a standalone name, because that's just a dumping ground for code. Oh, no problem, Sam. That's totally fine. So try to be specific. So this is naming. Now we talk about how do you structure things. So this is where we start focusing on the responsibility part a lot more. So if you think about it, you want to generally try to keep files small, generally try to keep functions small, and generally try to keep related code together. So you have something like a spaceship class. Are you going to put things in here like account management? No, you aren't, right? And you shouldn't. And so there should be a separation of concerns. I think you'll find a lot of these sorts of pieces of advice online in other ways. So for example, there's, what do they call it? Let me just search solid coding, see if that shows up. Yeah. So in object-oriented programming, they say you should have one responsibility for a class. You should have it open for extension. There are other parts of this too. You'll find don't repeat yourself. You'll find a lot of these different kinds of principles of software development here. And let's see what else. How would you go about it? Oh yeah, and then the other thing I would say is look at open source Unity projects. So for example, Unity typically has like an assets folder, you have a scripts folder, you have like a, I don't know, whatever else. I haven't used Unity in forever. And even just knowing what folders things other people tend to use can be pretty helpful. And then you can go in and you can look at this. So if I just type something like Unity GitHub, what is this? This is not, hang on a second, I want to see what this is. Okay, I did not know this existed. That's interesting. And this is not how you should search for things on Unity. Well, let's search for Unity game GitHub. Okay, this will probably be good. Yeah. So I'm just gonna click some random one that sounds like an actual game. Yeah, this awesome platformer game. Cool. We all like awesome games. Okay, so view code. Let's see what they have. They have an assets folder. They have packages, project settings. So let's see if we can find their script. There they are. And now let's see just how they organize things. So they made a utils. This is a .meta file. I don't know what that is. It's probably some like Unity artifact. And we could look through here and we could see like, would this make sense for me? So this is a relatively small file. They have multiple classes in one file. Like that might make sense for this. And so what I'm doing is not necessarily, hey, let me try to come up with advice on the fly. It's more like this is the process I would do if I were looking through this and trying to figure out how I would structure things for Unity. And then I'd also look at their documentation and see if they have any other advice there too. Okay. Hey, Nuka, how you doing? solid but also more advanced stuff like design-driven development. You could look up almost anything. All I was trying to say is there's lots of advice out there already that can help you figure out what you should do when it comes to these sorts of questions. And how's it working at Google? It's been good. I've been there for about 4.5 months. I still feel like I'm not operating at the speed I should be yet, but in general, it's going well. It's been a challenge. I've been learning a lot. I do plan on writing up a blog post in about a month and a half on all my experience there and kind of comparing it to other companies I've worked at. Okay, no question in the queue. Oh, okay, I'll just read this then. So how do you start learning blockchain and how to implement it for an experienced programmer? Do you know any resources? I don't have any specific resources about this, but how I go about learning blockchain is I'd probably, instead of diving into just coding directly, I'd go try to find what other people have already said. So depending on where you are with this, you might want to learn just the concepts of the blockchain and understand at a high level where these pieces fall into place. Then when it comes to implementing it, I think I would immediately go to open source projects. So there's like a million blockchain related things on GitHub at this point. And what you always have to question is, did they use the blockchain in a way that actually necessitated the blockchain? Because a lot of people use it as a distributed system, I feel, where it doesn't benefit too much from having a blockchain behind it specifically. And so again, this is going to be like what I did with Unity, right? I'm going to go through this. I'm going to try to figure out what is this. This actually sounds perfect. Build a blockchain from scratch and go. So yeah, I just looked through this, and this looks like it's a book, and also maybe some code. Yeah, probably. Anyway, I'll link this in, although this is just whatever I found on the first search. Can I link? Oh yeah, you can totally link something. Love that. Thanks. Yeah, like I said, I don't know what this document is, how relevant it is now, because I said last updated in December, and it's been 3 months since then. Hey Scott. And hey Blue Horse. Okay, let me take a look at this really fast. So what do you do? Okay, this is still good. Yep, still fine. Still fine. It's still fine. Okay, this is all still up to date. It's just not that interesting. Yeah, by the way, I think that was for Aurelia. Check those out. Yeah, good. I should have checked the name before typing that. All right, next question. I need to download a lot of... I need to download a lot of XML files from open database from a website. How do I do that? Can I find information? Based on your question, it sounds like there's some site out there and they have a database of XML files? Or are we talking about there's a site that hosts XML files that you want to download? Because these are slightly different questions, but one thing I would just suggest very briefly here is consider the ethical component of this, which is, are you scraping their site? What are you doing with their data? I don't want to say too much more than that because I don't know what you're doing exactly. It is a database. Okay, so it sounds like if they actually have a database of XML files, that they probably have some way of interacting with it, and then that they probably have documentation for it. If that's the case, I would just say read this and check it out. If they don't have it, I think the way I would pursue this is in one of a couple of ways. So like option number one is figure it out for myself. And what I would probably do is I'd say like goal download one XML file. And then from there, like write a program to crawl the database or list them all or download them all. I don't know how that's set up, right? So that's option number one. Option number two is look to see if someone else did this. And so just do searches, check GitHub maybe. It's a government site, they give away data, it's for analysis. Okay, yeah. At that point, I guess, can you just link it? I can probably give you more specific advice. Because, yeah, this might help because I can show you what process I'd go through, even if we're not going to get to the point where I'm like downloading XML files, right? Hey, Tabza. By the way, I don't think this chair got any better when I took the pillow away. I just don't think I like this chair that much. Ah. I might as well just put this back. Oh, it's in Lithuanian? I've been practicing Lithuanian forever. It's been 0 seconds. Well, let's see how I can learn. I've actually never been in this situation where I've gone through something like this. So first we click the translate to English button. Very important. Okay, open data in an XML structure. Data is constantly updated, generated dynamically. Use is free. When using it, it's necessary to provide the data source. Okay, what have we got? So if I click one of these, is this one of these XML files? Oh, okay, wait. So is this the entirety of them? All of these? Because if so, this is actually not too bad. What I would probably do is I would basically like download this page into a programming language. So if you don't know how to do that, by the way, you could type up something like Python download web page, and you'll find something on here. Should be pretty simple too. This is actually a crawler, but downloading one page should be, yeah, like URL open the page and then do a read on that page. So it's pretty simple. I don't know what beautiful soup is. Probably some like structuring or pretty printing library. So I download it. Then I would probably parse for links, and you'll find all of these. You will also find all of these other ones down here. And so then what I would do is I'd probably like, put something a little bit, some sanity checking in here. So I see there's SIP in all of these links, and they're not in these other links at the bottom. So I might be like, okay, if it's got this, maybe it's an XML file. Or if there's any other commonalities I can find between these all seem to start with like P2B in them. And then that's it. Then I would just also download those same things, just like I downloaded the first one, and then I have the XML files. In the same chair situation. Yeah. I liked my old chair, but the upholstery was tearing. Took some time to get used to though. Yeah, I just I don't like it as much. And I don't know what to do now. I don't want to buy another chair. Hey Johnny man. It's a web scraping package? Okay. Hey Dr. Ababane. Got the ergo chair too. Oh. Yeah, I remember reading on your stream info panels, Nuka, that you had a shoulder injury from rowing. Sorry, this is probably not something I should be sharing if it's no longer in your stream info panels. Oh, back. Okay, back injury. Ergo chair too. I'm trying to look at this. Yeah, I mean, on its surface, it looks pretty good, but yeah, it's an entirely different thing to sit on it. Got the desk bundle too. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Convince my wife that she wants this chair. She actually does want this chair. The thing is, while she's working from home, she has a really, really nice chair. But when she goes back into work, she's got to bring that chair back. But then she probably won't be working from home as much. I don't actually know what's going to happen. So yeah, if she does want this chair, I might just get another one. Because the one I got before was actually cheaper than this one. It was $150. It was secondhand. So I looked at Craigslist. I drove somewhere, nearly got murdered, got the chair. There was no danger. Okay, a new question. As a video about chairs, I liked it because they compared different office and gaming chairs. Yeah, here's the problem with shopping for chairs. Who do you trust? Because I have heard every single opinion about every single chair. This chair was uncomfortable. This was the greatest chair I've ever used in my life. This chair helped me do my taxes. And I didn't know, what will that mean for me? Will I actually like this when I sit in it, or is it going to be the worst? And so I have like 4 real life friends who got this chair and loved it, and I just don't. My takes to compare different. Oh wait, I'm reading the wrong thing. After 5 years of software development, I've been thinking about changing my job, and of course, Google and LinkedIn know this before I know it. or they incepted this idea into your brain. So they suggest jobs in senior positions. How do I know if I can actually fit it? Well, this is what I was talking about earlier, which is I would say apply for the jobs, and then in the interview, ask questions that will suss this answer out. So things like, here's what I know. How do you think I would fit in? And these are not like you should copy paste these and ask these questions. What else might I ask here? Something like, how many years of experience do the other senior candidates have, or other senior employees have? Not candidates, probably. These sorts of things, and that's it. That's the only way you'll probably know. There's no checklist ahead of time. Even the job posting itself, it might say something like, okay, you need 10 years of C++ and 5 years of whatever, some other thing, and some other technology. You may be like, well, I've got only 2 years of that and none of this, and you could still probably do the job. So even the job posting will not be a good mark of this. I think it's all just ask people who are at the job and try to figure out if you can make it. And in the end, remember that the company, if they hire you, it's like, well, they made a call, and now the question is like, how hard do you work to either make up for the gap in expectations, or are you just able to fit in and work smoothly? Do you have mentors there, etc.? So there's quite a lot that goes into this, but I think only being in the situation will tell you if it works. This chair saved me 10% on car insurance. This chair is my car, etc. Why is there advertising on your page? On Twitch, you mean? Is that what you mean by my page? Because no other page I have should have advertising on it. I have basically never set up ads anywhere. Oh yeah, you're talking about Twitch. I'm still a Twitch partner. I just don't have subs. I turn those off. And the only way I can turn off ads, I think, is if I run ads at a particular. There's no way to turn off ads. Let me put it that way. The only way I can turn off the pre-roll ads is if I were to run ads every like 2 minutes or something. I don't know what the numbers are, but basically I have no control over that. I'm not trying to make money off this Twitch stream. Don't be friends with them anymore, like that video, because everyone has their preference. They touched on where on the sea. They didn't recommend exactly one. May give ideas for your next chair. Yeah, I think what's important is just being able to test the chair before you buy it, which is pretty tough now because a lot of these chairs only seem to exist online. And like, what place sells them that you can go test them out? 5 minutes every 90 minutes or something. Yeah, I just felt like, yeah, it's not worth the hassle. What goals should I set for myself during my master's degree so that I can secure a software developer position afterward? I expect that my research supervisor will have me working on their buggy code base and topics that do not appeal to recruiters. That's still experience. Any experience is good experience for a resume. And it's all about kind of marketing at that point. If you phrase it as, look, this code base was super buggy to begin with. I came in there, I fixed things up, and we were able to operate more efficiently from then on out. It's like, well, that's awesome, right? Because it doesn't matter that the code base was for some very niche research. What matters is it was code, you maintained it, you improved it. So what should you set for yourself during the master's degree? I think here's in the ideal world, it's for one, and this is definitely number one, is like just learn what your courses have to offer. So don't try to just skirt by with the minimum. Number two, and again, we're talking about ideal here, is build a portfolio. So any sort of side projects you can do, any projects that match your target company's job postings. So you want to work for a web dev company and they're using React and Redux. Then you should probably learn React and Redux a little bit. And that way you are steering yourself toward a set destination instead of this vague destination of just, I want a job afterward. And number three is, I guess you can kind of like either talk to companies or apply while you're still in school. A lot of master's programs are 2 years, and sometime around probably like the 1.5 year mark is probably when people start applying. Maybe at like the 1 year mark, people start applying. So it's not like it's too early if you're even before that 1 year mark. And maybe you're just applying for an internship at that point. Yeah. You can try applying for an internship. Yeah. But yeah, I think this part's pretty important, which is what you'll be doing there, if it even vaguely resembles software engineering, is probably relevant to share. So you understand why it wasn't great. That's a pro point for you. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's if you were to just say something like, "Well, I worked on some stupid code for my research assignment," they'd be like, "What?" Hey, Pressel. My favorite TV series? I don't know. I've really liked Lucifer as of the last year, but I don't watch a whole lot of TV. And I just recently started. I've been watching. I absolutely love the idea of watching videos at more than 1x speed because it's like a life hack. I can feel, yeah, I'm sitting right now. I feel like I can do something that typically, and at no point in human history before this, could have been done in the amount of time that I then do it in. Because if you think about it, like, short of fast forwarding on a DVD or something like that, most of the time you're not watching a video at like 2x speed. So that's a very long way of saying I've started watching some Netflix movies. I don't feel so bad about them when they take way less time. If only you could watch at 2x on Netflix, but they only let you go up to 1.5x. Can't watch anything at normal speed, it's so slow. Yeah. I think that's true for everything except for music. Music is very bad more than the normal speed. So if I'm ever watching like a piano player or an orchestra or something, what chair is that? It's not a great chair. 5x only. The fastest you can really listen to things on YouTube is roughly like 2.5x. Beyond that, and you really can't tell what the words are anymore. That's at least in my experience. And I wrote a little snippet YouTube speed so that even on YouTube, like if you guys ever want this, you can just paste this in on any YouTube page. And yeah, that's roughly the fastest I'd ever go. Yeah, that's lightweight 30x. I get a 30-minute video done in 60 seconds. Oh man, it's the best, Professor Wannabe. You got to try it out. You got to try it out. It's so great. And you'd think that for some comedy shows it would ruin the comedic pacing, but it still pretty much works. Not buying it then. Yeah, I don't recommend it. I don't think it's bad. I just don't really like it. You have a project going on right now? My projects as of right now are an April Fool's joke. Keep a lookout for that one, everybody. It is the goofiest thing you've ever seen. Let me link my personal YouTube channel, which I think rarely shows up on this. I always link you guys to a stream related one. Wow, look at this. I searched for my own YouTube channel and what shows up is my Botland one and then my personal one. All right, it's this on April 1st, so I've been working on that. And then I've also been writing a novel. It's a comedy fantasy novel. That's it. Those are my projects as of late. Hasn't really been anything else. I don't think I've really had the time. Most work nights, if I can get anything in on either of these, it's great. But that's about it. But yeah, keep an eye out for this one. I think all of you who've watched me for longer than maybe like 3-4 months are gonna be like, "Yeah, I could have expected this from Adam." I'm not into cryptocurrency, no. And hey, do you own any Bitcoin or altcoins? No, I never got into that. I feel like I kind of missed out on. Whoops. Where's the? I think it's this command. Yeah. Is the April 2020 video uploaded somewhere? I think it's just the April Fool's command. Yeah. God, took forever. And yeah, how old am I? So I do answer this question in the worst possible way, which is a scavenger hunt. So if you want to know how old I am, the answer is there. It's on the internet. It's there for everybody to see. Just happen to be some steps in the way. You don't want to be rich. Wish I bought $100 of Bitcoin. But that's the thing. Like everybody, hindsight is 2020. Knowing that $100 of Bitcoin would have made you fabulously wealthy today, of course, would make everyone want to like, well, yeah, if I just bought that 5-6 years ago. But it's like, can you speculate well enough for in the future or what Bitcoin will be at so that you know how much you should buy now or any other cryptocurrency? And I've just never done the research for that. I was talking about this with my wife last night about just kind of finances. And the way I look at investment is it takes time to make more money. Sort of like how a job takes time to make more money. But this is typically a much faster way of making that money. bought a pizza with 15 Bitcoin. You know, really, there was an alternate timeline where Bitcoin was never worth anything, and then getting that pizza was like, hey, I got a free pizza, and all you suckers just spent your money for no reason. We are not in that timeline, so your brother could have had many pizzas. In fact, probably a whole pizza chain at this point. Yeah, what is 15 Bitcoin now? Like 15K? 1 Bitcoin to USD. 60. Man. Okay, that's a lot. It's like $1 million now. Yeah, if that's what actually happened, that'd be crazy. 903K, yeah. Yeah. So I think things are kind of winding down here. Like I said, I always kind of look at the view count at the end of the stream. Every stream, it's dwindled before what it had dwindled from what it had been on the past streams. And to me, what this indicates is that if there isn't a new audience in here, I'm not really providing much value. Last stream, I think we got to 65 questions. And this stream, what was the last one I copy pasted? 35. Yeah. So I don't know about for next time exactly, like 2 weeks from now, but I want to come up with something different, and I'm not sure what it'll be. What was the idea I had for today? Oh no, it was Sam's idea. Sam's idea was to play Animal Royale, the Minecraft mod that I made. Hey, Blu-ray King. Just live codes on funny project. So the problem with doing this a while ago when I started this was that I didn't have the energy to code some project. Now I think I might be able to fit it in, but I'm not sure. I still have to think about this more. Hey, Mr. Spacey. Yeah, so for those who don't know what Animal Royale is, what happens when you search for this? I probably shouldn't search for this on my main screen. Let me search for this on not my main screen. Uh, it's showing up game stuff. Where's my video? Live recording of the audiobook. No one wants to hear that. I thought about what if I worked on the novel, but I think that's a bad idea. I got to do something with music or coding or Minecraft mods. So I'll keep an eye on this. I might still do another group mentoring stream in 2 weeks, but yeah, I think that's going to be it for today.